Iran just executed Navid Afkari, an Iranian wrestling champion. Why? For the crime of protesting against the Islamic regime in the streets. It seems that the Islamic regime of Iran is scared of a public uprising from within the country. Navid Afkari is a high-profile guy, a wrestling champion, and executing him makes the Iranian Islamic regime look horrible, but they don't care. They know no one's going to do anything about it. But this internal front is only one of the growing problems for the Islamic regime of Iran. The past few weeks have also seen more mysterious explosions in Iran, including one just a few weeks ago that caused a massive power outage.
Well, for the third time in 3 weeks, there was a major explosion at what's suspected to be a sensitive military site in Iran. The latest occurred yesterday morning in western Tehran and caused widespread power outages. As of now, it remains unclear who or what is behind these string of explosions. There have been 3 of them, including one at the Parchin military site, and another one where they make centrifuges for their nuclear program.
Following years of covert activities that seriously damaged Iran's nuclear program, assumed to be coordinated by the US and Israel, the guess is that there is a guiding hand behind these latest explosions as well. In addition to these concrete actions harming Iran's infrastructure and slowing down its development of nuclear capabilities, President Trump's recent normalization deals between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and now Bahrain adds additional pressure to the noose being applied to isolate Iran. This unheard of step of normalization between Arab Muslim countries and Israel is being conducted for one major purpose: to strengthen the US-led coalition against Iran, the biggest terror-supporting state in the world that is actively destabilizing countless of Middle Eastern countries like Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen, and looking to become an even bigger destabilizing factor for the whole freedom-loving world once it has nuclear military capabilities that it is seeking. And it's working. Iran is scared. Iranian President Rouhani is quoted in an article warning that, quote, if the agreement leads to expanded Israeli influence in the region, things will change and they will be dealt with in a different manner, unquote. The chief of Iran's armed forces, General Staff, Major General Mohammad Bagheri, also warned that, quote, if anything happens in the Persian Gulf and the national security of Islamic Republic of Iran is endangered, even slightly, we will blame the UAE and will not tolerate it, unquote. Interestingly enough, some Iranian politicians are pointing out that Iran itself is to blame for this development. Ali Motahari, a former Iranian lawmaker, recently tweeted that, quote, aside from Emirates' treacherous act, we also deserve some blame. We have scared the Arabs and pushed them towards Israel. An example of this is storming the Saudi embassy and setting it ablaze. The policy of making Iran the enemy has been fruitful. This needs to be remedied, unquote. Similarly, Muhammad Ali Abtai, a former vice president to Mohammad Khatami in 1996 to 2004, cautioned in a New York Times article that, quote, we are finding ourselves in a situation where our neighboring Arab countries are turning to Israel to confront Iran, end quote. So far, it seems that these agreements between these Sunni Muslim countries and Islam are working. Iran is scared. Finally, in a recent article titled The Israel-UAE Agreement, Busting Myths and Sending Messages by Eitan Gilboa, Director of Center for International Communication at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, he highlights another strategic reason for these deals that also has to do with Iran. This one connected with the upcoming United States elections. Gilboa writes, quote, Israel and the Gulf states are worried to death about Joe Biden and the Democrats because of their intention to restore the nuclear deal with Iran negotiated by Barack Obama. The Israel-UAE agreement could be a message to Biden and the Democrats that they would do well to give more weight to the interests of American allies in the region of the Middle East, and should certainly not legitimize an untrustworthy Iran with imperial aspirations. End of quote by Gilboa. Personally, knowing that the Obama-Biden Democratic Party policy vis-a-vis Iran and the Middle East was more about ideology than defense-driven, I highly doubt these agreements will make a difference to a potential Biden presidency, but it at least strengthens the Middle Eastern anti-Iran coalition to be better prepared if Biden does become president. Hopefully, Americans will not give Biden the opportunity to prove this strategy right or wrong.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.